Welcome to knittingboard.com. Let's do some sewing of our knitted pieces that we've just completed on the knitting board. The type of stitch that you use to sew your pieces together once they are completed depends on the effect that you want or the way that you want them to look. Here we have the loose, soft edge of your knitting. That's the sides as it comes out of your knitting board. The cast on and the bound off edges are a little bit different because they have a little rigidity to them. So sometimes your pattern might require that you sew the soft sides together, which is going to create a nice smooth seam that's hardly even noticeable. But if you are sewing your finished edge to that soft seam, then you have to do it a little bit differently. There's also times that you want a ridge to show when you sew your pieces together, a little band edging, or you might want something like you're doing a strap of a bag and just do a simple whip stitch. So let's look at some of them. First of all, let's say that this is going to be a strap of a bag. I'm going to use a bright orange yarn just so you can see what I'm doing here. This might just call for a simple whip stitch. A whip stitch is just what it sounds like. You're just picking up the edge. You would knot this, and then you would just whip it over and keep going in from the same side. Just keep going along every few stitches and let it whip over the side. Now once this is done with the same color and the same yarn, it's going to be very hard to see, but it's going to be a very soft edge which allows that strap to roll. So that's a nice time to think about using the whip stitch. But what if you are doing a little bag and you want that bag to have a little stand-up edge down the seam? It's called a top stitch. In that instance, you would simply insert from one side through the other side. Keep your stitches paced at the same distance apart. And what's going to happen is at the end, when you pull that stitching nice and tight, you're going to have that nice little edge that is going to stand up. See if I can show you there on the edge, and you can see that seam extended out. The other stitch that you'll use most often is called an invisible stitch. Especially when you're sewing two soft edges, you want that seam to just disappear. That's when you're going to use your invisible stitch. You might be using it to sew two pieces together. You might be using it for the edges of a bag that you've just knit a long piece, folded it up, and now those two soft edges need to be sewn together. Let's look at how you're going to do that. What we're going to do is just simply insert our needle into the edge of the seam, and you will see the little cross piece that's down there. Let's pick up a couple of them. Easier to see. Okay, then we're going to go to this side, and again, you're picking up the cross piece picking up the cross over here. There you can kind of see it a little better. And then come over to this side. Over to the other side. I'm doing about every other stitch. You can do it tighter, you can do it looser. Depends on the seam that you want, but you just want to make it secure. If you feel that you need to make it stronger, you can always use a double strand of sewing. Again, into the edge of that piece right along the edge. And then when you pull those together, you will see that that orange yarn has just virtually disappeared. Your seam is going to be invisible, especially when it's done with the cream. And you will have a nice, smooth seam that you will hardly be able to find. Let's look at it if we were going to do it on the bound off edges, because you know when you put those two edges together, you're going to have kind of a stripe down there with all of your pattern running lengthwise together. So we're going to be doing the same thing, just inserting the needle. It's a little bit tighter, but you're going to be doing the same thing. You're going to be going down through the center. It's a large needle. You can probably do one a little bit smaller. And come over and grab the other side also. Very large needle. Okay, now once you do that, you'll be going down and then you will be pulling those two seams right together, just like you did on the soft seams. Now, what if you have one firm seam and one side seam together? In this case, because this soft seam is much stretchier than your bound off seam, what you might want to do is place them together the way you want them. Take a few needles, paper clips, something that will just kind of pin them together, and do that on down the piece so that you have them stretched out just the way you want them. And then take your sewing and sew those pieces together. That way your soft seam won't get all stretched out. It'll stay just exactly the way you want it. But remember, finishing is important, so pay close attention on your sewing.